All right, so let's just kind of review this at a really high level. I'll answer my own questions. I don't think I can wait long enough for the awkward silence when I'm videoing here. So, what inputs were needed to create this design? The first thing we needed was the locations, right? Where are all these suppliers? Where are the plants? Just the physical locations. The second thing we need to know is the orders, right? Where are we shipping it from? Where are we shipping it to? And how many is it, right? Is it 100 or 500? What's the order quantity? The next thing we need to know is some type of packaging or volume information about those orders. So we had a packaging tab. That gives us context to, 100 units of this. Well, how big is that, right? Are these car engines or are these bolts, right? So we had the packaging information, and the final piece that we needed to know was the rates, right? So what is our rate structure to ship from these different origins to these destinations? So those were our inputs to complete the design. The next question: in addition to lower cost, what other benefits exist for managing transportation? Man, I'm literally going to give you guys all these answers. So a huge benefit here is control. So you get to decide what day these orders are picking up on, and more importantly, what day they're delivering on, right? When suppliers are shipping on their own, you have very, very little control over how orders arrive at your destination. So because of that control, you also have the ability to plan your work schedule, your employees, how busy your trailer yard is, how busy your receiving department is, right? So if you can spread out several of these routes so that they deliver maybe an hour or two apart every day or every week, you now avoid the peaks and valleys of work, which really drive a ton of problems and frustrations within operations. So I would say those are two of the biggest benefits. The other one is just the increased visibility. So if you go to a supplier to pick up 3 pallets and they have 0 pallets, that truck driver is going to let you know, like, why did you send me in there today? They didn't have any freight for me. Now, instead of knowing that when the truck arrives, when the supplier doesn't ever ship, you now know multiple days in advance, right? So you have more opportunities to adjust your plan, maybe switch out your production schedule, those types of things. So any kind of foreknowledge or extra visibility you can get in the supply chain is hugely beneficial, right? The next piece: what are the drawbacks to managing the inbound in this scenario? So I kind of handed you all everything. That's not obviously always the case, right? So the huge piece there is data collection. So I've told you guys before, my first job when I worked at LeanCor was basically just, calling suppliers, hey, I see this part here. We don't know how big it is. Can you tell me how many fit in a box? Okay, how many boxes fit on a pallet? Can we stack those pallets on top of each other? About how heavy would those pallets be? You can tell I've asked these questions a few thousand times, right? So there is a significant amount of upfront work to know how big the packages are. Crazy idea here. Work with your purchasing team, and when you add a new part into your system, hey, we're gonna start buying this certain part. Get the information up front. Hey, how do you ship this part? Make that part of your new parts process, right? If you do that, you will be the first company to achieve that. We've tried with several of our customers in the past. It's just really hard when the person collecting the information doesn't see the value in it, right? So that's certainly a drawback. Another piece, you have to invest in your suppliers. You have to teach them, hey, you don't just get to call a truck and ship it when you want to. We're going to come in every Wednesday at 9 a.m. and pick up your freight, or whatever that time is, right? You have to add discipline into their process. That takes time and effort, and it's difficult, wow, all that. It is totally worth it when you look at the cost savings, though. And then this last question, this is the type of thing that keeps you up at night if you do this type of work. What if the orders aren't level throughout the week, right? So let's say this volume was every Monday and Thursday. What happens if the orders are twice as high on Monday and that much lower on Thursday? Suddenly that neat little truck you had planned that was 25 pallets, suddenly you have to pick up 40 pallets worth of material, which means you're running one truck really full and one truck half full. And then on Thursday, maybe there's only 10 pallets. So again, that's a half full truck. So if you had level volume there, you could potentially fit both of those on the same. You could fit both of those days' orders on full trucks, which is obviously the goal of all this is to have efficient transportation. So one of the weird parts about this is once you've built a logistics plan like we did in our scenario, you actually have to go back to the parts people, the material planners, and say, hey, we need you to order these this certain way, which feels a lot like the tail wagging the dog. But once a company sees the benefit of that, it's actually it's revolutionary, honestly, because the material planners realize wow, I can work to get 5% down on cost with these suppliers, or the logistics team can save us 20% by optimizing our transportation network, right? So as long as the company believes in kind of the total cost picture and not trying to drive down individual pieces of that cost, it's definitely a win-win for the organization. So this is a really important couple of slides here, and I'll probably hit it again when we have our next in-class lecture. We're going to talk through a few different inbound strategies. So the first one, we call it a hands-off strategy. This is basically you go to a supplier and say, hey, I want to order steering wheels from you. And I don't care how you get it here. All I care is that you get it here on time. How much is it going to cost for you to deliver it to my location, right? This is really, really common in industry. The benefit of it is it's very easy to execute, right? In terms of, hey, they got them here. There's no complaints, right? However, it's also the most expensive because I don't know if you guys know this, but when people bundle prices together, like our favorite cable company or whatever, that price normally ends up having some padding in it, right? So if it's, our piece price is $1, but if we're going to deliver it, it might cost us 30 cents. Let's just say $1.50, right? And that way we kind of cover ourselves against any discrepancies. Like for instance, the fuel surcharge we talked about on Monday. If that fuel price jumps a bunch, this number one option doesn't list fuel anywhere in here, right? Which tells you that whoever's providing you that bundled price in terms of a quote, they're taking that higher fuel price into consideration when they give you this quote, right? So you are always going to pay the high end of that instead of kind of the middle. So that's option one. Option two would be a routing guide. Routing guides are basically you go to the carriers and say, how much would it cost for you to run from Central Kentucky to Chicago, right? And so you negotiate down the rates, okay? And then you share those rates with the suppliers and say, listen, I want you to quote us a price just for the parts, and then I want you to use this list of carriers that I give you, it's called a routing guide. That's what a list of carriers with rates is. So I want you to use these carriers, these approved carriers, and then we'll pay the bill for transportation, right? So you've got a little bit more control on your cost, right? So there's a little bit cheaper on price. However, you're still going to have very, very low visibility. And I need to mention this on the hands-off option as well. We call it the Christmas morning effect. The truck pulls up to your dock, you open the back door. If you didn't know what the supplier was shipping, if they didn't send you some kind of notification, this is the first time you find out what's on the truck, right? Oh, do we have any steering wheels? Oh, no, I guess they didn't have any steering wheels to ship us this week, right? That is the worst feeling, is expecting freight, you need it later that day, and it's not on the truck, right? So both of these options really fail in that area. It's very, very hard to know what's on that truck. In the routing guide option, at least because it's your carriers, you can probably find out, hey, we've got a load coming in from Johnson Controls today. Okay, well, I know I'm at least expecting something from Johnson Controls. However, is it, the parts I need? You don't know. It's really hard to know that, right? So, so that's the routing guide technique. This is also a very common process, especially when fuel prices jumped, and folks wanted to start seeing and understanding how much of their rates or costs were going to fuel versus the actual rate per mile. A lot of companies moved to the routing guide model and said to carriers like, hey, give me a standard fuel table, we'll pay you these rates, and then the suppliers just kind of set up the shipment and then forgot about it, right? So the third option, I call it managed inbound. That's not a formal name. I don't know if you know that, but neither is hands off. These are just kind of the names I gave to these. But managed inbound is a strategy that really gives you the full control of your inbound freight. So you are managing the freight. You are taking responsibility for it as soon as it leaves your supplier's dock door. There is absolutely a high level of visibility. You have to have some kind of system for them to communicate with you. You know, hey, I've got an extra pallet. Can you fit it on the truck today? Oh, what part number is that? Now you know that part number is coming in, right? It also gives you a lot of flexibility because you're now, instead of, like, imagine you have 3 roommates, right? One option is for you each to go grocery shopping on your own, right? Another option is one of you says, hey, if you guys make a list, I'll run to the grocery store for us, right? That's kind of what you're doing in this case. You're not treating each of your suppliers independently and having them ship freight fairly inefficiently. You're looking at the entire network and deciding, like, where can we actually save some money by combining things, right? It is absolutely the least expensive. Typical savings was 10 to 30%. Again, it just depends on the discipline of the network, quality of suppliers, type of freight, distance, all those things. But it also requires a ton of effort. It gives you a really controlled flow into your docks. You don't have any unwanted freight. A supplier can't just dump 10 pallets of random stuff on you because you're actually receiving against their shipping notifications. And it also, again, gives you really good lead time on any shortages. The last thing I'll say here, and this is just want to emphasize again, it is hard work. It is not easy to do, but there are huge rewards at the end of it. So I say consider capabilities. The reason I say that is just, there is a reason for third-party logistics companies to be around, and this is a big one of them, right? There are companies that are good at doing this process. So that's why a lot of companies, especially on their inbound, will turn to a partner, a 3PL, third-party logistics provider, like a LeanCor, Ryder, Penske, Transfreight, to manage this inbound process because of their expertise in the field. So we'll spend a few minutes here on the logistics sub-processes. The first piece, obviously, determining your logistics strategy, like how are we going to attack our logistics, both inbound and outbound. You're going to figure out where your data is coming from. You're going to do some type of a design on your network, hopefully more often than not. You're going to do some rate negotiations to figure out what exactly is happening in the network and also in the marketplace, and figure out, are your rates competitive? You do some tactical daily routing and actually select carriers to put under those trucks. And then you actually run the trucks. You run the network. Trucks flow through the network, parts flow through the network, and then you measure that activity to see, where are we falling behind, where are we missing the mark on our plan. So in terms of a logistics strategy, one option is treat the inbound and outbound just totally independent. I've seen organizations where there's a VP of inbound and a VP of outbound, and the only thing they may have in common is they probably share rates with each other just to take advantage of volume discounts. Other than that, they're just entirely separate from each other. That's really, really common. You think about a company like Caterpillar, most of their inbound freight is small, like electronics or small plastic parts, all those things. Their outbound freight, literally it takes like 4 trucks to take a giant mining truck in pieces out to a job site, right? That's just a totally different problem to solve. You need a different skill set. So sometimes the right choice is just totally separate those two activities. The next thing to think about is basically look at where your customers are, where your suppliers are, what network kind of looks like, and see if there's any opportunity to kind of combine forces across your inbound and outbound. Take advantage of synergies, economies of scale. I'm trying to think of all my business buzzwords here. And then the last piece here, and I touched on this earlier on the outsourcing side. You can work with several different third-party logistics providers. You can also just work with one. So we had some customers that wanted us to do everything. We got involved in warehousing, we did inbound and outbound and rate negotiation, all those things, right? Another strategy is to have like two third-party logistics providers. You're basically pitting them against each other, and you say like, hey, Penske, go watch and see how the Ryder team is doing and tell us if they're doing anything wrong or if you could do it better. And then you go to Ryder and say, hey, Ryder, I want you to see if there's anything about the Penske approach that you think could be done differently and give us a proposal on that, right? It's, as long as there's some kind of healthy balance between the two, that can actually produce some really good fruit for the company. But I've also seen that lead to some pretty dark meetings with shouting and cussing and all those things. So you have to decide if you're willing to do that. It's an interesting strategy. In terms of long-term partnerships, I think you have to have some kind of commitment from all of those 3PLs or give that to all of those 3PLs so that they feel safe. Otherwise, you're basically running around stabbing each other in the back, which never ends well, right? The last option is, again, fairly common, especially with a large company like a Toyota. You actually have an LLP or a lead logistics provider. Their job is to basically oversee the other 3PLs. So someone's involved with outbound, someone's on inbound, someone else is on rates, somebody's doing freight bill and international, whatever. And then they sit over top of all of those 3PLs and basically provide guidance and make sure that the structures are in place and also just that the long-term strategy is being executed. So totally different models. Most companies try out several of these, and honestly, like you get a new VP of logistics in the door, and suddenly you might flip these and say, you know what, I've always used Penske. Let's go switch to a single source with Penske. It's really common, but it's also common to be one of 3 or 4 3PLs that work with a company. A funny thing on that last piece with the LLPs, if you're a 3PL managing other 3PLs, you're called a 4PL. Then you've got 4PLs being managed by other companies, that's a 5PL. I don't know why, but I've actually seen a 6PL where a company is managing 5s and 4s and 3s. It's like, okay, can we just maybe we should start a new company or something, right? So there can be layers to that, which obviously can get pretty unhealthy and inefficient, but highly complex situations, you may have to look at that in terms of your outsourcing.